Hello, YouTube world. Thanks for checking in the Khaliis take. Now, today's take, we'll be talking about what happens if the Nets meet up with the Clippers in the NBA Finals. Now, before we get into the video, please like, subscribe, also leave any comments and the notification, hit the notification bell as well. And please check out my prior content to this video. I think you'll like it and I think you'll find it intriguing. So let's just jump right into it. Last night's game really didn't tell me much. It just told me that the Nets really still have defensive issues, and they're going to have even more defensive issues, even with Kevin Durant back, because they're going to rely on his offense even more to win these games. And when you do that, I think that really just puts a burden on the team all the way around, because when you're locked in playing a team for a 7-game series, a lot of your weaknesses get exposed more. And if your weaknesses get exposed more, then that's like not good. Because what can happen when your weaknesses get exposed in a 7-game series, a team can figure out ways to tamper with that in different aspects of the game, because they can, find matchups that will benefit them more than the matchups you have to benefit you against them. And see, what I see with the Brooklyn Nets, I mean, even last night's game, you're about 15 with all that firepower, even though they don't have Kevin Durant. The Nets get lazy, they get lackadaisical, and they get real complacent in the games. And that's not something you need to do in the playoffs. And if they continue that, it'll be really bad for them. Now, I think if they play the Clippers again in the finals, if they happen to meet in the finals, I think the Clippers would have an edge, only in one aspect specifically. Their two wing players can really defend. And, the Nets are going to hit a lot of shots, this and that. But if the Clippers lock down and play defense the way they can and where they're supposed to, they can slow the Nets down. And slowing the Nets down is getting them, like last night, 110 points, 108 points. If you keep them within that range, you can beat them. And I also think, if they play the Lakers too, the Lakers will have a great chance too, because they can slow them down also, with the likes of Anthony Davis in there, and more defense you have to put on him. So like I said, I don't know if everybody should crown the Clippers as a champion just yet. I know the Clippers won last night. I know they were the better team. I get it. But at the same time, you have to understand these games like this show you a lot of different things. And it just all depends what you see and how you see it. And what I see in last night's game, that should have been a game they won by 10, 15 points, not a game that it came down to the last second shot and they cheated Kawhi on the last play of the game. And now I really don't understand why Paul George wasn't in there. He was the hot hand. He had it going. I think I hear something about a minutes restriction. But that he had for last night. But even with the minutes restriction, it was only 3 minutes left in the game. You got to let them ride it. You got to let him ride that out, because you never know what could have happened. Maybe he could have hit a big three. Maybe he could have dropped 40 points and they win that game instead of him having 34. They win that game, we're having a whole different conversation today, or at least the NBA analysts are. So, I don't want to get too far into it and, that nature. But at the same time, I'm looking at the situation in only in one way. And one way is the Nets still look vulnerable to me, even though they didn't have Kevin Durant and they're not at full strength. When they have Kevin Durant, when they're at full strength, they do look vulnerable still. And I still think a lot of teams could get at them. I just don't think no team in the East could beat them. But I think there are at least a couple teams in the West, including the Clippers, of course, that could beat them. So, like I said, when you play a team in a 7-game series, the whole aspect of everything is different. The game is different. The matchups are different, and how you strategize between the other team is really going to make a difference. Now, when I think of the Nets, I'm thinking of all offense. And don't get me wrong, they have 3 of the best players ever assembled on one team. But at the same time, teams like that have been beaten. Think about it. LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, the Miami Heat. What happened to them years ago in 2011 against Dirk Nowitzki and the Mavericks? They lost because they got too confident and they got too high on themselves and they start making mistakes. And then the Dallas Mavericks just exploited their weaknesses by, putting in matchups, having certain matchups that they like. And it really just changed the whole series. And defense helped the Mavericks beat them. But the Mavericks had one superstar. They had three. And I say Chris Bosh was he was borderline superstar back then because he was really good on Toronto. So they had basically three superstars, and they couldn't close the deal with one superstar. Even though Dirk was shooting lights out, but still, that's my point. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win the championship just because you have these three players and none of them really actually, play defense like that. And I know they're getting a lot of credit because they make some defensive stops here and there, but every team makes defensive stops here and there. Every team does that. That doesn't necessarily mean you're a defensive stopper because you make a couple of defensive stops. No, it just means that you made a couple good plays at that time, and that helped you win that game. But even all these defensive stops they talk about that the Nets are making, why aren't the Nets winning by 10, 20 points? Last night shouldn't even have came down to that last shot or layup with Kawhi Leonard. The Nets should have won that game easily because really, after, Paul George got taken out the game because his minutes restriction, even before that, before Paul George got hot, it just seemed like the Clippers were deflated. They had no energy. They just weren't the same team. It's like, Kyrie and James Harden kept hitting shot after shot, and DeAndre Jordan is just, defensively like a hawk out there. They just looked deflated, after a while. It looked like they just really couldn't beat the team. And even with that being said, it's a one possession game with less than 2 seconds, with less than 10 seconds to go in the game, and the Clippers actually could have won that game. And it's like, when you look at stuff like that, those little things like that, those little weaknesses will come back to haunt you. You cannot allow that. When you have your foot on a team's neck, you better keep it there, because in the playoffs, things like that will hurt you. And the only thing I'm saying is, I don't think everybody should crown the Nets just yet, and I think everybody still should look out for the Clippers, because what I saw last night, honestly, the Clippers are playing really good this year and don't even have a point guard. Every good team you see in the NBA has a point guard. They don't. Patrick Beverley is a decent guard, but he's not a real true point guard because defenses don't respect him like that. And even without a real point guard, they're still one of the top teams in the league. So I say, if they go out and get a point guard and address the issue, I think it's really going to be tough to beat the Clippers. And hell, it's really tough to beat them now. Because even when they have off nights or something like that, they still find their way back into games. And at the end of the game, they're right there to win them. They couldn't do that last night because maybe a unfortunate call. But at the same time, hey, that doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? The Nets should have won that game easier. And they didn't, but oh well, they got the W. That's all that matters, and I understand that. But people need to understand that the Clippers are a better team than what you think. And I think if they're clicking on all cylinders defensively, and if Ty Lue can get his rotations better, I think it makes a world of difference. Because Lou Williams is a liability when he comes in there defensively. So play Marcus Morris more. Have Marcus Morris, in there defensively a little bit more in regards to, putting some more defense in there. Don't, you know what I'm saying? Like I see some games where Marcus Morris is in and out, and then, Kawhi's in for a quarter by himself, and then PG's in a quarter by himself. It's like he's just trying to balance the scoring, but he's not really trying to implement the defensive end more. And I think if he does that a little bit more, I think the team would be even more dangerous. So, but like I said, big win for the Nets last night regardless, and we'll see how the future goes with both of these teams. But I definitely can't wait to see both these teams in the playoffs. But at the same time, hey, we'll see how it goes, and we'll see exactly, what pans out. I hate the Clippers lost last night. I wanted them to actually get that victory, but hey, at the same time, this is the way the NBA goes. So with that being said, hey, till next time.